Good morning, everyone, especially Life Church, friends, family, anyone tuning in today. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you've had a good week, especially in light of the situation, that you found time for rest and that you've been able to even get extra time with the Lord during this season. I have a couple quick announcements specifically for Life Church, and then I'm so excited to get into our text today, which is Psalm 23. But for Life Church, two quick updates about this season for us. First of all, if you're looking for an opportunity to serve in our community, Brent and Karen Morris, they run a nonprofit in our city called Learning Help Centers of Charlotte, and they need help packaging meals and delivering meals to kids and families who need food but don't have transportation to get it, especially on the weekends. So if you are interested in that, we're updating our page, COVID-19 page on our website, and there will be a sign-up form for you there. So you can fill out that form and it'll go directly to Brent and Karen, and they'll be able to get you plugged into what they're doing there. And then second and finally, for life groups this week, we're going to try something a little bit different. I know that we've been doing Zoom, and I hope that that's been okay for you guys. I know it's a little bit awkward, especially for introverts, to try to sit in front of a computer and talk. But I'm actually going to do some facilitated discussion and some teaching this Wednesday. We'll have a video of me doing some teaching on some stuff that I know is going to be really helpful, and then you guys will be able to break off into your Zoom groups from that teaching and discuss it together, catch up on life, and then pray together. And I hope that'll be helpful for you. If you're not in a group yet and you're a part of Life Church, I would encourage you to join one and just get into some sort of community now when we're forced into isolation. I think it's extra important. If you have your Bibles, why don't you go ahead and go to Psalm 23. We're going to jump right into it today, and I'm going to read the entire psalm, and just like I did last week, and then we're going to focus primarily on verse 2. So if you have your Bible, Psalm 23, let's read together. The Lord is my shepherd. I have no more want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I would imagine that just about every single one of you watching me right now is struggling with some degree of fear, worry, and anxiety. For some of you, this is a brand new thing. You don't typically struggle with anxiety. You're not typically prone to fear, but the tidal wave of COVID-19 is pummeling you right now and you feel it. For others of you, though, this is not a new experience and you're just like, welcome to my life, hashtag, this is what anxiety feels like. This is part of your daily existence. And more often than not, anxiety, fear, and worry are debilitating for you. I read an article in The Atlantic where one of the editors wrote openly about his own struggle with this lifelong anguish of anxiety. Look at how he described his experience. He said, from an early age, I was a twitchy bundle of phobias, fears, and neuroses. Even when not actively afflicted by acute episodes of anxiety, I am buffeted by worry. Here's what I've tried to fix it, he writes. Individual psychotherapy, 3 decades of it. Family therapy, group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, hypnosis, meditation, role-playing, interceptive exposure therapy, in vivo exposure therapy, self-help workbooks, massage therapy, prayer, acupuncture, yoga, stoic philosophy, and audio tapes I ordered off of a late-night TV infomercial. And medication. Lots of medication. And I can't pronounce half of these, actually just about all of them, so I'm not even going to try. So let's just skip to the next line. He says, also I've tried beer, wine, gin, bourbon, vodka, and scotch. Here's what's worked. Nothing. Maybe some of you can relate to that. The truth is that whether or not this was your experience before COVID-19, or this is your experience now, whether you've tried everything under the sun to cure yourself of it, or you're just now getting your feet wet, Fear and panic are on the rise, and anxiety is at an all-time high. Which is why the verse we're going to look at today in this ancient and yet incredibly timely song is so important for us. Because this verse, in verse 2, it's all about tranquility. Look back at it with me. David sings in verse 2, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters." That phrase could literally be translated, "He causes me to settle down." He causes me to rest. The imagery here is of a shepherd causing his sheep to settle down. It is such an important image, and it's so profound because sheep are notoriously anxious and fearful creatures. It takes absolutely nothing to scare the mess out of a sheep. And once one sheep starts to panic, the entire flock starts to panic right along with it. I read a story this past week of a couple of shepherds in Turkey who were eating breakfast one morning, and they looked out the window to see one of their frightened sheep run and jump off of a cliff. They have no idea what scared it. Nobody knows what happened, but before they could even move a muscle, their entire herd of 1,500 sheep followed that lone scared sheep and jumped off the cliff as well. When it was all said and done, the local newspaper reported 450 of the sheep perished in a billowy white pile. The rest of the flock actually survived, which is kind of funny because after that 450th sheep, there was a big pile of fluffy white cotton, and so all of these sheep just fell on a nice little bed, and they survived. Another shepherd talked about one time his friend came to visit him from the city, and she just so happened to have a tiny Pekingese dog with her. As soon as that unexpected little puppy jumped out of the car, his 200 sheep jumped in terror and sprinted across the pasture. Listen to how he described his flock. He said, "As long as there is even the slightest suspicion of danger from dogs, coyotes, cougars, bears, or other enemies, the sheep stand up ready to flee for their lives. They have little or no means of self-defense. They are helpless, timid, feeble creatures whose only recourse is to run." If there is a picture in the animal kingdom of fear, panic, and anxiety, it is the sheep. Which is funny because out of all of the animals that the Bible uses to describe us humans, more often than not, it chooses to use the sheep. We like to think of ourselves as strong like lions or majestic like eagles, but when the Bible talks about us, it talks about us as being scared like sheep. Did you know that the number one command, the command that's given more than any other command in the whole Bible, is do not be afraid? It's because more often than not, we're scared and timid and anxious like these sheep. And yet, in Psalm 23, the sheep that's singing this song, David, isn't a picture of fear. He isn't a picture of panic. He isn't a picture of anxiety. He is a picture of tranquility, peace, and rest. Somehow, the Good Shepherd had caused him to settle down. Today, I want to dig deep into how he did that for David, or more specifically, what the Good Shepherd gave to David. And I want to do that because he wants to give the same things to you and me today as well. And he wants us, in the midst of all of the chaos and all of the panic, to settle down and rest in tranquility. So if you're taking notes, and I would encourage you to do that. I don't know what it's like to watch me on a phone right now. I would imagine it's really hard and there's all kinds of other distractions. So if you want to take notes to help you focus, go for it. But I'm going to show you 3 gifts the Good Shepherd gives to his sheep so that he can lead us out of anxiety and into tranquility. So 3 gifts that he gives us to lead us out of anxiety and into tranquility. And the first one is that he gives us provision in our time of need. He gives us provision in our time of need. It's easy for us to read about green pastures and still waters, and it's easy for us to just kind of like move on and to breeze through this psalm as if they're not significant, but they're both really important. They both point to the extreme measures that the shepherd had to go through in order to give his sheep tranquility. For example, green pastures are not easy to find in Palestine. I've never been there. I've just read all these shepherds' accounts and I've studied the geography from a distance. Maybe you've been to Palestine and you know what I'm talking about. But in a good year, it rains from November to usually February, which means there's only about 3 months where the grass is actually green. The rest of the year, it is a sun-burned wasteland. And so if sheep are going to have something to eat, their shepherd is going to have to do a ton of work in order to provide grass for them. One shepherd by the name of Philip Keller wrote about his own experience in the fields. He said, green pastures were the result of clearing rough and rocky land, of tearing out brush and roots and stumps, of deep plowing and careful soil preparation, of seeding and planting special grains and legumes, of irrigating with water and husbanding with care the crops of forage that would feed the flocks. In other words, green pastures did not just happen by chance. They were the result of the care and the work and the diligence of the shepherd. The same thing was true of still waters. In fact, shepherds would have to plan their entire day around finding water for their sheep. But the problem with water wasn't just that it was rare and the competition was pretty intense. The problem with water was that even if the shepherd could find water for his sheep, they were too scared of moving water to drink from it. Even if it was really shallow, if the water was moving in any direction, those sheep would not drink from it. And so what the shepherds have to do in the Middle East is they have to dig trenches that lead off of the stream or the river and create a little nook so that the water just stops in this dead-end pond. And so the water will be still enough for the sheep not to be scared and so that they'll actually drink. It's a lot of work. So whether the sheep ate from green pastures or drank from still waters was totally dependent on the willingness of the sheep shepherd and the ability of that shepherd to do the work and provide it for them. Here's the thing. If sheep are either hungry or thirsty, they will not lie down. You cannot make a hungry sheep settle down. You can't force a thirsty sheep to rest. They will stand up, look off into the distance, and long for their bellies to be filled. One shepherd wrote about the flock of sheep that were kept at the ranch next to his. And these were ranches that they had to rent, and they could do whatever they wanted with them, and they could keep their flocks on them. He described the shepherd that was next door to him as the most indifferent and careless manager he had ever met. He didn't care at all about the needs of his sheep. He didn't care about their condition. He didn't care about their safety. And so year after year, they went neglected. Every year, these poor sheep were forced to gnaw away at bare brown fields of impoverished pastures. Every winter, there was a shortage of nourishing hay and wholesome grain to feed the hungry ewes, and they only had polluted and muddy water to drink as well. In their thin, weak, and diseased condition, these poor sheep were a pathetic sight. He says, in my mind's eye, I can still see them standing at the fence. He says they were huddled, sadly in little knots, staring wistfully through the wires at the rich pastures on the other side. Guys, David knew that in order for sheep to settle down and rest, their shepherd would have to provide for all of their physical needs. And in the same way, if we're going to get any rest, especially in this season, if we're going to be freed from anxiety and panic and worry and fear, our shepherd is going to have to provide for all of our internal spiritual needs. As we saw last week, and I'm not going to repeat everything from last week, but our deepest needs, the needs that lead to peace, are actually internal. He's going to have to do whatever it takes in order to satisfy our souls. And I say all of that This is the most important point I want you to see in this first gift that he gives us. Our level of fear and anxiety and worry reflects the amount of care that our shepherd pours into us. Our level of peace and security mirrors his knowledge of what we need and then his ability and willingness to actually give it to us. Here's the good news. Our shepherd has done the work. Our shepherd has provided for us in our time of need, and he's promised that he'll always provide for us in our time of need. Get this. This is where it's so beautiful. This is why we sing this song with so much conviction. He didn't just have to cultivate land to produce some green grass for us. Our shepherd had to do a different kind of work. Our shepherd had to stoop down from heaven, take on human flesh, get hung up on a cross, and bear the wrath of God so that he could bring green grass to us. Our shepherd didn't have to hike up a couple of trails and find a stream and dig a trench and create a pond. He had to pour out his life as an atoning sacrifice for our sin so that he could put living water inside of us. He came to be our bread, which is his body broken for us. He came to be our wine, which is his blood that was shed for us so that we would never hunger and never thirst ever again. He has done the work. But he didn't stop there. When his work was finished, and you remember on the cross, his final words was, "It is finished. I've accomplished what I came to accomplish." When his work was finished and he went back to the Father, he didn't leave us alone. He gave us his Spirit. The same Spirit who was hovering over the waters at creation and breathed life into Adam's nostrils, and then breathed life again into the second Adam on the third day and raised him from the dead, is even now breathing life into us, speaking life into us over and over again. Romans 8:11, 31 through 32 puts it this way, and I love this passage. This is probably my favorite chapter in the whole Bible. If you're looking for something to read this week, Romans 8. Paul says, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how much more will he not also with him graciously give us all things?" He gave us his son. He provided for us in our time of need. How much more now will he not continually give us everything that we need to satisfy our souls? He's done the work. And so if he cares for us so much that he was willing to hold nothing back, and he's promised to never hold anything back from us ever again, we can settle down and rest in tranquility. I love how George Mueller put it. George Mueller is one of my heroes of the faith. He said, "The beginning of true faith is the end of anxiety." So our good shepherd gives us provision in our time of need, and that provision causes us to settle down. The second thing he gives us is he gives us protection in our moments of fear. I think this is especially important right now. Sheep won't lie down if they're hungry or thirsty, but on top of that, sheep won't lie down if they're afraid. So one of the shepherd's most important jobs is to provide protection. Got me thinking about fear a little bit. I was trying to think this past week and thinking about fear, that we're all afraid, and I think we all have different degrees of fear right now. But what keeps us up at night more than anything else? And I was trying to think through this. Like, what are we afraid of more than anything else? What is it that keeps us from rest? Because if the good shepherd's going to settle us down, he's got to find that fear that's behind every other fear, and he's got to do something about that fear. He's got to eliminate that fear in our lives if he's going to give us rest, if he's going to cure us of anxiety. And I'm not talking about weird phobias here, okay? we all have those. I'm not talking about your fear of snakes or heights or spiders. I have a really weird fear of people touching their eyes or of people touching my eye. It doesn't make any sense. I know this, but the only time I've ever had a panic attack, a real panic attack, was when I was at the eye doctor. And this was like a full-fledged thing, hyperventilating, sweating through my entire shirt. I mean, it was drenched. I lost control of my whole body until finally I just passed out. And it was all because a doctor tried to put an eye drop into my eye, okay? I have a crazy fear of eyes. And I know that if you were with me right now, you would all be touching your eye to try to throw me off, which is why I'm really glad I'm talking to a camera so that you can't do that and scare me and make me sweat like crazy. We all have all of these crazy phobias, though. But when it comes to the fear that the Good Shepherd needs to settle in us, I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm not talking about all the weird stuff like eyeballs. I'm talking about the fear that's underneath every fear. The fear behind all fear. It's a fear that we all can relate to. It's a fear that we all share. It causes all of our worry and all of our anxiety. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what that fear is off the top of my head, and so I had to do some digging, and I did a lot of research into fear this past week just to try to figure out, like, what's the fear? What's the king of fear? And I found an essay in the Journal of Anxiety Disorders that I think answers the question. It was written by a guy named Nicholas Carlton, who's a notable psychologist, who's a professor in Canada. And the title of the essay is Fear of the Unknown. One fear to rule them all. You can probably tell by the title that he's convinced that behind every phobia and underneath the surface of every anxiety is always one fear, and that's the fear of the unknown. Listen to his opening sentence. He says, one fear to rule them all, one fear to find them, one fear to bring them all, and in the black box, bind them. And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you know that he totally ripped that off of Tolkien, and you can type amen in the comments if that's you. It's one of the reasons I love this article. But throughout his article, he proves that most of the time, it's the unknown, the uncertain, and the unexpected that produce the most panic, fear, and anxiety. The problem with this, and it's massive, is that we live incredibly uncertain lives. We can't control anything. Our lives are unpredictable, they're uncertain, and any moment can bring us danger and disaster and distress from all kinds of different places. I was talking to a lady this past week at my car shop as I was getting my oil changed, and actually it was 2 weeks ago. It was before the order not to go out. And she told me that she's afraid to be happy because she thinks that the moment she has some happiness, the other shoe is just going to drop and everything's going to be ruined and her life is going to be turned upside down. I'm sure many of you can relate to that as well. There's so much uncertainty. Even our happy moments have a tinge of pain because we know they're going to end and we're afraid it's going to be really painful. We just don't know how it's going to happen. This is the fear behind all fear, the fear of the unknown. One report found that Americans are spending $2.2 billion mystical palmistry so that they can get some help charting the unknown. I don't believe in God. I'm the master of my own destiny and the captain of my own soul, but please read my palm so that I know something that's going to happen in the future. It's so funny to me. We all want to be the captains, and this is just kind of a side note because I struggled with this for most of my life. I wanted to be the captain of my own soul, but we stink at being the captains of our own souls. We don't know how to chart anything. It's all unknown. It's all scary. I think this is the biggest thing that we're struggling with when it comes to COVID-19, or at least this is the biggest thing I'm struggling with when it comes to COVID-19. It's the unknown. What's going to happen to the economy? Are we really in for another recession? I mean, I've heard people talking about a depression. That would be terrible. What's going to happen to my friends? What's going to happen to my family and my wife and my kids and my parents and my siblings? Are people that we know actually going to get sick and maybe even die? Like, what's going to happen to our community and all of the restaurants and all of the shops and the businesses that we love? And what's going to happen to our church? Like, how is all of this going to end? What does it mean for our future? Guys, this is unknown, uncharted territory. And uncharted territory is scary because it's full of hazards, dangers, disaster. In the Middle Ages, people had the same fear of the unknown, and so they came up with this really unique way of warning each other not to travel in uncharted territory. It was a phrase that maybe you've heard of, hic sunt dracones. And that phrase literally means, here be dragons. I was really hoping to show you some slides today. We're working on it. We're still maybe a week, maybe two away from that technology, because I had all of these maps and pictures of these maps to show you from the Middle Ages. Basically, in the middle of the maps, there were these lands and these seas that had been discovered and they had been developed. The people had walked the roads, they'd sailed the channels, and so they could put names on these locations and they could say, I know where this place is. But then on the edges of the maps, in the seas that they hadn't traveled on, in the mountain ranges that they'd never traversed, they painted dragons. On one of their globes that we still have access to today, the phrase is actually written, hic sunt dracones, here be dragons, and the message was loud and clear. The unknown and the uncharted should not be messed with. It should be avoided and it should be feared. It's dangerous. Disaster waits. There's monsters out there in the unknown. There's dragons. Don't you dare go out there. And yet, what I love is that in the midst of all of their fear, there's one map that provided hope. It was a map called the Psalter map, and it hung in King Henry III's bedroom. I would encourage you to get out your phones and just look it up on Google. Look up the Psalter map, and you can look at what I'm going to try to describe for you in a very poor way. But in the middle of the map, there's a globe that was full of their marked territory. It was the known territory. And at the bottom of this globe, though, of course, at the bottom of the map on the edge, outside of the boundaries, are these two hideous and dangerous and deadly looking dragons. But unlike all of the other maps in the Middle Ages, there isn't a sense of fear in this map, because in this map, those hideous and dangerous dragons are actually placed under the feet of Jesus and his angels. I think this image is so profound because it shows us that while there are unknown and uncharted territories, and while they might be dangerous and hideous and deadly, they are under the feet of the Creator and the King of the universe. We could mark COVID-19 with a stamp or etch it in stone. Here be dragons, because we don't know what it holds for us. It is uncharted territory. But we do know one thing, and this one thing is sure, that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how scary it gets, no matter how deadly it gets, it is under the feet of our King. He's a good shepherd. He loves us. He cares for us. He provides for us. And he protects us because we are his kids. We're his children. So no matter what lies out there in the unknown, we can settle down and rest in tranquility because he protects us in our moments of fear. Third and finally, he gives us his presence in our moments of trouble. This is so important because God doesn't always protect us from trouble by plucking us out of it. Like he doesn't always just snatch us out of suffering. That's not what protecting us means. In fact, more often than not, He allows us to go through suffering so that we'll experience the freedom, hope, joy, peace, and comfort of His presence. Oswald Chambers put it this way. He said, peace is not the absence of trouble. Peace is the presence of God. So as we go through trouble, He gives us His presence to calm us down and cause us to rest. One of my favorite books by C.S. Lewis, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. A young girl named Lucy and her brother Edmund and their cousin Eustace get taken back to Narnia for an adventure. And if you're not familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia, there is a character that represents Christ, and that character is a lion by the name of Aslan. So the three kids are taken to Narnia, where they go on this epic voyage, and while they're on this voyage, they come to a dark and mysterious and enchanted island called the Dark Island, or the island where dreams come true. The problem with this island, though, is that the dreams that come true are actually nightmares. And so the kids and the rest of the crew begin to make their way through this misty blackness, and it's an abyss, and they can't see anything, and it's foggy. And all of a sudden, their worst fears start becoming reality. They're totally overcome by terror. They're totally taken over by fear. But in that moment, Lucy, at her wit's end, does what most of us do in our times of trouble. She prays. She says, Aslan, Aslan, if you ever loved us at all, send us help now. The darkness didn't grow any less, but she began to feel a very, very little better. After all, nothing has really happened yet, she thought. After a while, a ray of light fell on the ship, and Lucy saw something that she thought looked like a cross. It was actually an albatross with its wings outstretched. And the albatross circled the ship 3 times and landed on their mast, and then it led their ship out of the darkness. But as it circled the ship, it flew down to Lucy, and in Aslan's voice it whispered, "Courage, dear heart. Courage, dear heart." And after a few moments, the darkness turned into a grayness ahead, and before they could even begin to hope, they were shot out into the sunlight. They were in the warm blue world again, and all their fears were vanquished. I love how one author put it. He said, Christ's presence in the picture throws a different light on the whole scene. Suddenly, things aren't half so black and aren't nearly as terrifying anymore. The outlook changes, and there's hope for the first time. In John 16:33, Jesus actually says this explicitly to his followers as a promise. He says, "I have said these things to you so that you may have peace. In the world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." Guys, there's nothing more profound than the awareness that our shepherd is close to us, that he hasn't left us alone, and that even though everything in front of us is black and the world is full of trouble, we can take courage because he's overcome it all. In his presence, all of our fear and all of our panic and all of our terror of the unknown are vanquished. Peace is not the absence of trouble. Peace is the presence of God. Now at this point, we're going to come to a close here, but I want to take our minds back to the work that our shepherd had to do in order to bring us back into the presence of God. Because again, our peace and our tranquility and our rest hinge on the ability of our shepherd to give it to us and to provide for our needs. I think a lot of the time we neglect the presence of God and we forget the presence of God because we haven't given much thought to what our shepherd had to do in order to get the presence of God for us and in us. Remember, just think back to the garden. The garden was Jesus' greatest moment of trouble, when fear and terror and anxiety were swallowing him up like a tidal wave, kind of like the tidal wave of COVID-19 times infinity. He asked his Father to take away the cup 3 times. Father, if it's your will, take this cup away from me. If it's your will to do it any other way, please do it. Father, spare me from what I'm about to endure. But if this is the only way, if this is your will, let it be done. Not my will, but yours. He knew it was his will, and so he submitted to it. The guards showed up in the garden. Judas betrayed him with a kiss. All of his best friends abandoned him in fear, but none of that compared to what he would have to endure on the cross, as his Father, who had loved him and blessed him and delighted in him for all eternity, turned his back on him and crushed him for our sin. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "For our sake, the Father made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." This is what our shepherd had to do so that you and I could experience the peace and rest and tranquility of the Father's presence. He had to become sin and face the rejection of God, and in so doing, take away our sin so that all we would know is the acceptance of God. So now when we enter the presence of the Father, we don't get the just judgment that our sin earned for us. Now, because our good shepherd took that judgment upon himself, all we know is blessing. Now, rather than getting wrath, all we get are open arms, ready to embrace us. Courage, dear heart. I know what you're going through. I've gone through it too, and I've gone through worse. In this world, you will have trouble. Don't be afraid. Overcome the world. I have done the work. I have accomplished everything for you. We can know what peace and rest and tranquility feel like, even in the midst of chaos and fear, because our shepherd has given us provision in our time of need. He has provided for all of our soul's longings and desires so that we can be satisfied and say, I want no more. He's given us protection in our moments of fear. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of fear and death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. He's given us his presence in the hour of our trouble. So now we can say, in all of this, even in the midst of a pandemic, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all of the days of my life, and I will be in the presence of the Lord forever. Let me read Psalm 23 again in its entirety, and we'll close. If you want to bow your heads and close your eyes and let this be a prayer that you pray to the Father even now. The Lord is my shepherd. I have no more want. He causes me to settle down. He gives me tranquility and peace and rest in green pastures and beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I don't know where you are today. I hope that encourages you. If you are in Christ, if you have already put your trust in his finished work that he accomplished for you. May you live in peace today. If you still haven't put your trust in that, may today be the day. If you don't even know what that means, shoot me a message or an email or just on Facebook or whatever, and I'd be happy to talk through that with you so that you can know what tranquility looks like. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I love you. I'm here for you. Call me if you need me. Go in grace.